Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, our introductory webinar on Smoke and Mirrors, the illusion of the employment services sector. All right. So we have this quick participant advisory. The following presentation does contain coarse language. Some participants might find the content controversial, yet thought-provoking. So participant discretion is advised. My name is Sarah Delicate.
And I'm Angela Hoyt. Together, we bring a corporate memory that spans 3 decades of government-funded employment service programming and delivery. We have seen programs come and go and come again, around again, and we wrote a book, and we wish to share in our book and today both our wisdom and our cranky.
Now, many of you have worked with us for many years, decades, some of you. So you're kind of familiar with our cranky, but we've packaged all of that cranky into one tidy little book. And we want to thank you in advance for being interested, for being open-minded, for being tolerant, and for receiving the messages that we're presenting today in the spirit that is intended, which ultimately is about continuous improvement. It really is about inspiring debate and stimulating conversation. So everything that we are showing you today comes out of the book. Now, we would need to have like an 8, 9, 10-hour webinar to cover the whole book. So this is really just an introduction to what it is that we're going to be bringing to the table. And we start with talking about the problem defined. Now, of course, we all know this. We have an employment problem, and it's massive. It's globally massive. And simply put, some people who want to work and can work are not working. Even if the jobs are there, they are not working. Even with the whole shift that's happened with COVID and the employment sector and the labor market and everything else, there are still those that want to work who are not working, even though the jobs are there. So from a labor market perspective, what we have is jobs without people and people without jobs. In the book, we talk about the community perspective, the family perspective, the social perspective. So, because this is a problem all over the place. So why is this happening? And this isn't new. This has been happening for a decade. So why is this happening? Is it skill shortages? Is it labor shortages? Do we have a shortage of quality candidates? Maybe it's a shortage of quality jobs. Is our education system failing? Is it economic policy issues or kind of the, long-standing battle between the haves and the have-nots? Are these local issues or are they global issues? Is it a question of societal ethics? Whose failure is this? Is it a far left failure or a far right failure? Is it structural oppression of visible minorities, of women, Indigenous persons, and persons with disabilities? Is it all of these things? Is it all of these things all at once? We don't know.
But what we do know is that decent employment builds strong, safe, healthy, and sustainable communities, individuals, families. That the problem is worth solving, the employment problem is worth solving, and governments across the globe are investing billions of dollars in local employment programming to address this problem. And it's a problem we have to solve. Now, in the book, and again, if you have worked with Sarah and I, we talk about a classification of a clientele, the stars, suns, moons, clouds. This is not meant to classify people and label people to keep them out of service, to screen them out, but it's to help us understand that clients have different needs. They need different interventions. The stars and suns are people that are closest to the labor market. The moons, half moons, and clouds are the people most distant from the labor market. The stars and suns are the people that employers want because they tend to have less employment barriers. And what we see, and again, seen over decades, that the stars and suns are the ones that get the most resources. There's a creaming happening. They get the most resources. The moons and clouds are left in the hopper, in the system, being counseled to death and still unemployed. So can we talk? Despite the billions of dollars invested across the globe, it just isn't working. And we believe that employment system solutions created that we're going to refer to as the employment service system, it is largely broken. And there's far too much money being spent, far too many players involved in essentially what is window dressing. And it looks like we have a solution, but in practice, those most vulnerable people continue to be left behind, unemployed. Now, a wide sweeping disclaimer. By saying things are broken, we're not saying that everything's broken. We certainly see that some things are working. Some of the time we do see it. But what we see when those things are working, that they're not systemic, they're not scaled up, they're not sustainable, and they don't result in transformative change, system change, and significant results to the populations of people who we're concerned about. And we welcome the opportunity to review any research that could demonstrate otherwise. So what do we see? Now, this is our grand illusionist. He represents the illusion. He likes money, he likes numbers, he likes screaming. he likes the act of it all. And he is in our book throughout. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. But it is like the Wizard of Oz. There's all looks great, and there's challenges behind the scenes. So what do we see? We see that organizations are drowning in survival culture. They're driven to tell a story that funders need to hear to keep their funding. Performance is measured, tracked, and scored to death. And but program values, principles, quality, and long-term outcomes are rarely measured. And ever-increasing caseloads, onerous and controlling paperwork, restrictive operating dollars, and expanding rules, regulations, and restrictions. The other thing we see is fear-based work cultures. And Timothy Galway in The Inner Game of Work talks about, in fear-based cultures, the need to look good and not look bad can take precedence over the business objectives at hand. Fear creates interference, which prevents people and organizations from reaching their full potential. Now, here's our stars, suns, moons, clouds again. This is something else we see, that there's a lot of hitting the targets and missing the point. And this is done on the backs of the most vulnerable job seekers, who are almost always the intended benefactors of the government-funded services.
So what is it that we see? This is where the very foul language comes into play. Angela and I have, again, been in the field for decades, and we have seen some very, very common practices that come out of this fear-based culture. And in the book, we have tagged them the BS survival practices. And these BS survival practices are signs and symptoms of a core problem, that something is going wrong. And so here's the gigantic list. We just simply cannot go through every one of these practices, but they are covered in the book. And we've lumped them into a couple of broad categories. So there's the BS client intake. So how we actually open clients, the donut and coffee intake. Now, this is one, Angela, that I used to have, and which was, I used to run an Aswan model job club in British Columbia decades ago. And what I learned very quickly is if I had donuts and coffee, I could fill a workshop, any workshop, as long as I had donuts and coffee. It didn't matter if the clients were suitable or even eligible at that point. And it was just across the board. So donuts and coffee. We've got BS non-intake, which is the creaming, which is, we see this, right? The specialized rejection non-intake. I'm sorry, but you will be better served up the street in the organization that specializes in working with Indigenous persons, right? We see that everywhere. BS spend the money practices, fill the order, corporate welfare, best friend employer, private membership placements, etc. And then the BS employment outcomes, how we actually track jobs. So we've had one comment, does this apply just to employment programs? No, no, I would imagine a lot of this stuff applies across a lot of nonprofit and, anywhere where there is a rigorous performance framework where your funding is connected to a very tangible absence and presence outcome. It drives practices, and really it's so much of our book talks about that kind of the dark side of performance measurement and management. But there are all of these outcomes that we see that ultimately make it look like we're doing really great stuff. But when you dig just a little bit beneath the surface, it just isn't the case. Now, we've had that question before. Is this just about employment programs, or you guys are from Ontario? Is this just Ontario, right? Is it just this program? Absolutely not. In fact, this is one of my favorite reports. It comes from the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, which is a global international organization. The vast majority of countries are part of this. And this is their 2005 Employment Outlook Report. Think about how long ago that was, but you will recognize the language in this report. In fact, we've got them up on the screen. Gaming, parking, creaming. It applies everywhere. And this is a quote from that report. Arrangements, so what they're saying government has to do, government has to make arrangements to prevent gaming, the artificial manipulation of outcome measures, and creaming, failure to enroll disadvantaged clients. Now, I've got to tell you, there's a whole bunch in this Outlook report that I don't like. It makes me really deeply nervous, right? Where the recommendation is that, all outcomes are tracked by the funder. It's simply because the outcome report seems to imply that we can't actually trust the service provider. And I think that's a dangerous and very slippery slope, right? So how do we make sure that we don't end up in a place like that? Now, Angela and I, again, much of our work over the decades has been coming in and working directly with organizations, directly with governments as well, helping to build the policy and the programming and the training and so on. But when we uncover the illusion, or when the illusion is shared with us, it's because we don't work for government, it's usually a really honest conversation. And we hear people say, well, we just have to get through this year, right? We're running this job fair again just to get us through this year, or doing these job development practices or whatever. You know what, Sarah? We had 2 staff go off on sick leave. There was a bus strike. We had to close for a week because we got infested with bed bugs. We just couldn't keep up. But next year, we're going to get back on track. Next year, for sure. Just as soon as we get out from under this very threatening cloud of defunding. And there's been some comments in the chat already saying, this is getting worse. We're seeing that this is getting worse. So in the book, we spend a lot of time talking about what is it that we see? Why do we think? What's happening? What's the evidence that we're seeing here? Then we talk about the root causes of this illusion. Why are we all kind of feeling complicit in the creation of this illusion of the employment services sector? So there are 6 broad causes that we have for the illusion. And we're not going to be going through them in detail today, but we're just going to kind of outline them. I'm going to do the first one. Angela's going to do the next 5. So the first illusion is cause number 1. Cause number 1 of the root cause of the illusion is government sound bites trump service excellence. Now, we're just heading into an election here in Ontario. So some of this stuff we're starting to see already play out. But in the book, there's a good news story that I'm going to read for you right now, because so many of you will be able to relate to this. So good news, right? So I want you to imagine this is in a newspaper or in a government announceable or being spoken off a soapbox, whatever. It doesn't matter. Good news. Today, our government is publicly announcing a new employment program for the most popular yet not evidence-based issue of the day. We have carefully chosen the existing network of employment service providers that did not have to compete for this contract, because who has that time for that level of rigor? Because we did not consult with them in advance, they don't know anything about this program, but we are confident that they will be up and running by next Tuesday, and we will have our wildly successful and grossly manipulated PDF formatted performance scorecard out to you, our public, by next Thursday. Why are we so confident? Because these service providers rely on us for their very existence, and we know that they will be happy to help us launch this very timely and critical election announceable. 6 months from now, when data tells us that we got the policy all wrong, we will simply change the program rules through a memo, and these very nimble service providers will happily and instantly tell their job seekers and employers that they no longer qualify for funding or for programming or for both. Oh, wait, now you do. Now you don't. Do, don't. This program uncertainty builds great resilience into our labor market and into our most vulnerable populations. So I've been seeing the chat box. It's
Yeah, it's a hot
hysterical.
one, Sarah.
I know I nailed it. Isn't it awesome? Right? So we can relate to this. Government sound bites trump service excellence. So in the book, we talk a lot about why does this happen? How can we get away from this? But also just naming it and recognizing this. So the next 5, over to you, Ange.
So you entertained everyone there, Sarah. You got a good laugh, and that was a good icebreaker in the chat. So another cause is accountability gone wrong, where increased accountability is not matched with increased flexibility. So here's the accountability, and this is exactly what you have to do. And when things don't work out, it's, who's accountable for that? So you need flexibility and accountability. Cause 3, only winners get elected. As Sarah said, in Ontario, we have an election right now. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. Cause 4, the same old program design. So when a program is announced, Sarah and I we get so excited. Sarah and I get so excited. And it's like, okay, we know what the problems are. Everybody knows what the problems are. And hopefully this new program addressed it. And then every time we're disappointed. It's like, it's the same old program. It's the teach a person how to fish program that works for the suns and stars. So that same old program design is really discouraging when you know where the challenges lie.
But with a new name, new program name.
New program name. Yeah. Lack of service provider capacity. This could be policy, procedure around purpose, leadership, the practice of staff, but that lack of service provider capacity to deliver is a cause of the challenge. And then myths and mindsets. This is about the isms. There's a lot of mental models and assumptions about the people that we work with, these stereotypes. And actually, when those government announcements come out, it feeds into those myths and mindsets, like, we have this program for really challenging youth, that who's ever going to want them, except we're going to give you money, so you're going to take them. That it just perpetuates those mindsets about certain populations. And we know that most people are inherently good and they wish to be successful in their jobs. They depend on government funding and may believe their hands are tied, and they often are, and can feel pressured to literally play the game. It's just a vicious cycle. Now, then we go to how do we create a virtuous cycle? So we talk about thrival practices, so that you're not just surviving, you're thriving as an organization. And so we know that this problem is worth fixing. Unemployment in general and unemployment in particular can have a tremendous cost. And governments are spending billions and billions and billions of dollars in employment programming, yet again, the populations most in need are still largely left behind, costing billions more dollars in human and societal ills. But truth be told, if it were a simple solution, we would have found it and implemented it long ago. There is no well-designed performance measurement framework that will put everyone in line. There's no single policy promise. There's no amount of government funding, no magical program design, no scathing auditor's report, no solution-focused training program, no agency certification program, no service quality model, no single policy fix.
And I think, Ange, that this is an important piece, right? Like,
yeah.
We wish there was a magic bullet.
Yeah.
And we talk about that in the book, that this isn't, sadly, we wish that we had written the book on how to solve all of these issues. But it is a complex issue, and it certainly isn't, all of these pieces. So a comment says, is there anything we've learned We believe there is. We
Mhm.
believe there's a tremendous amount of information around what we have learned and what we can learn. But part of it is do we have the courage to listen to it? Do
Yeah.
we have the courage to speak truth to power, right? To change how we operate. Now, of course, with folks on the line, and Angela, I don't know if you saw, we have New Zealand on the line here today too,
Yes,
which is
yes.
spectacular. Um, we often, you folks are not the policymakers, right? There may be some government on the line here today, but often you're not. It's, I'm an employment counselor or I'm a job developer and I'm just sitting in my
Mhm.
office every day, right? How much
Mhm.
influence can I have? How much control can
Yeah.
I have? So in writing our Thrival practices, we have really worked to try to see everybody because we're all part of the solution. Ange, I don't know if you have anything more to say on this slide before we move to the next.
No.
Okay, so our Thrival practices fall into these three broad categories: purpose, policy, and practice, because we believe that there are changes, that some of them are just small changes that could be made that would make a very, very big difference. These areas cannot be dealt with in isolation, and I'll talk about that as we go through this section. They're part of an interconnected system, so when one area falls, it brings everything down with it. So you might have great policy and you might have great practice, but if we're not connected to our purpose, it doesn't matter, right? You might have great purpose and practice, but without solid policy, right? Like these are
Yeah.
very, very interwoven and interconnected. So the first area that we're going to talk about is purpose. And Angela, at any point, if you have anything
Mhm.
to jump in, because
Yeah.
what we've done is our names are attached to each
Yeah.
slide. So this one's me, but it's a really, really big and important area. So what we know is that if a government funder, an agency manager, an employment counselor, or a job developer, if they don't understand their purpose or if they lose touch with their purpose, then policy and practice doesn't really matter that much. In fact, nothing else matters, because ultimately it is your purpose that gets you out of bed in the morning, which this is one of my very favorite graphics. This is you getting out of bed with purpose. We had such a brilliant illustrator on our book, and I thought that's just hysterical.
Yeah.
That's us getting out of bed with purpose. um, Right. So, us getting out of bed with purpose, it drives us to perform with integrity. It gives us the courage to speak truth to power. It fuels our desire to seek solutions and to solve problems. It is our conviction to purpose that would have us choose, this is really important, have us choose to be unemployed ourselves, then game in a system that leaves families in poverty while giving out wage subsidies to people who would have been hired anyways. I'm going to repeat that. That's a direct quote out of our book. Your conviction to purpose would have you choose to be unemployed yourself, then game in a system that leaves families in poverty while giving out wage subsidies to people who would have been hired anyways. It is understanding the hypocrisy of our stable employment on the backs of those who need our service the most. We know for a fact that there isn't anybody on the line here or any conference that we
Mhm.
speak at or any gig that we do. There is not a single person that is in this sector to get rich. I'll often say that. How many of you here, put your hand up if you are in this field to become wildly wealthy? Nobody ever puts up their hand. And it's because, well, first of all, the wages don't allow for such things. And this is a passion field. It's a purpose field, right? Nobody is here to get rich. So we hope that you are in it for purpose. And if not, then it's actually possible that we are part of the problem. We need to find a way to reconnect to the purpose of our job, of our vision, our mission, and our mandate, and the reason that we exist. So under the Thrival section of purpose, we have three key points that we talk about. We talk about reconnecting with your purpose or getting out. And I know the getting out part, Angela and I hummed and hawed about that. Like, does that sound mean? you know, the pathological kindness in us is like, oh, but it's kind of true, right? Because it can certainly get in the way. So number one, reconnect with your purpose or get out. Two, tether everything to purpose. Every single thing in your organization needs to be tethered to purpose. Your policies, your HR hiring practices, your training, your customer service policies, your everything, name it, tether it to purpose. It's at the center of everything. And the last section we talk about here is to use purpose power wisely. Purpose power. How do we use and what do we mean by purpose power? This one specifically speaks to government, right? That government doesn't wave the purpose flag anywhere near enough, right? We get our program guidelines. The program sometimes talks about purpose. It's astounding how often we'll read guidelines and they don't even talk about purpose, right? We're really clear on what we're supposed to do and not do and whatever else, but really not so clear on purpose. So wave that flag. So those are the three broad areas under this section. Angela, anything else on purpose?
No, but I just want to touch on one of the comments here, Sarah, that, when we look at that Venn diagram, it kind of all fits together here. So just let me see. So there was a comment about, about service delivery, and maybe it was this one, that the service delivery, how come with all you said, one can still see few agencies that are successful with the same funding to job seekers with higher barriers to employment. There's a lot of myths and mindsets within that, people with more barriers, we need more pre-employment or need more money, more subsidies. But the other thing is, when we look at, again, the Venn diagram, the purpose, practice, and policy, is that organizations, because of that same old program design, they are using a program design that works for people that are close to the labor market. Here's your resume, here's your interview, go ahead. And does not work for people that need something else. They don't need to learn how to find a job. They need someone to open the market for them and focus on doing and keeping a job.
And I think that's an important point too, Angela. And I suppose it connects to practice, connecting to purpose. But and we mentioned this in the book, where people always ask Angela and I about org design, right?
Yeah.
How many job developers should we have? Right. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, Ange.
Well, it can be frustrating, Sarah, because our answer is it depends. It depends on so much. The other one I've had lately, do you have separate counselors and job developers, or do you blend the role? It depends, and it's not so simple as just saying 10, 1, yes, no. That the way you design the form of your organization depends on the functions and who your clients are and what they need. And this is where building capacity, and that's saying, okay, so we have people that have barriers to employment. What do they need? Who do we need to help them do that? So it is an it depends answer when we look at the staff capacity to do things.
But I think that also connects back, Angela, to one of the points you made earlier around the root causes about accountability doesn't match flexibility, right? So in order to be held, very, if you're tethered to accountability, meaning you're not getting your funding if you don't hit these targets, there has to be flexibility built into the program. You have to let me decide how many job developers I need versus employment counselors. You need me to allow me to be the expert here. And on that comment around, but there are a few agencies that are hitting all the targets, working with really, disadvantaged or marginalized population. Absolutely, there are. We see it all the time, right? And we can look at two agencies side by side, and one has 10 employment counselors and one job developer, and the other one has 10 job developers and one employment counselor. Same program funding, same guidelines, right? But the flexibility allows you. So that's us becoming feedback informed. And we'll talk about that as well. So anything else on purpose, Ange, before I move off this one?
Well, the other thing is we have to remember, because it can be easy to go into the mode of, oh, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing this is the government. I sign because the government tells me this is the way to do it. We want people to be empowered by this, to lead up, to lead sideways, to help your funder understand the unique needs in your communities. And that's the only thing that's common in organizations, is the uniqueness of their communities. But you have to sell it. You have to persuade and influence why, and based on your good data and information that you have, why it is important for you to have flexibility, why a certain design is important for a certain clientele, and to be able to look in the mirror and see how your own mental models, those assumptions that you have, your own mental models stand in the way, that we have to look at clients differently. And Sarah, I just want to say what's interesting, just talking to employers, right, to employers that hire people right now, that I was talking to one yesterday, and they were saying, and I think you've heard this too from employers, Sarah, it's like, we will take anyone, like vertical breathing, we will take anyone, but help us, right? We need to go to organizations that can help us work with people that we haven't, that we're not familiar with. Just show us how.
So Angela, as you've been talking, we've been getting just a tremendous amount of comments in the chat box, which is entirely the purpose, right? Like we said at the beginning, we've put this book together so that our sector can have a really honest dialogue about this. So there's conversations there about accountability, and there's one comment about the service delivery model of their funders and their supported employment programs date back to the 1970s, top heavy, command and obey, hierarchical, and absolutely sometimes that's within government. Sometimes it's not within government. The funder will actually create this really flexible program, but then the agency gets it and they impose all of these rules and regulations, and they shackle employment counselors with ticky boxes and check sheets that say if you have 3 X's, you must do this. If you get 5 X's, you must. Don't even think employment counselor, right? The system is going to tell you what to do, right? So it becomes this kind of cycle, and we unpack all of this stuff in the book, and we cannot wait to continue to have this conversation with folks. So please do make sure you join us on our socials of Facebook and LinkedIn, because that's where we're starting to have these conversations. So we're also going to be talking today. There's 3 webinars that we're going to be launching over the next couple of weeks, $25 webinars. So one of them is called Ditching the Cookie Cutters, using a client service model to stop the creaming. And this is very much about understanding the sun, stars, moons, and clouds, and how just understanding those client needs, how that needs to inform your service delivery model, your service decisions. Anything else you want to say on that, Angela?
Yeah, no, that's all exactly that, Sarah. Yeah,
okay.
That there isn't cookie cutter. People get a customized approach. We know who's in the door and what they need, and giving them what they need. Not everybody gets the same thing.
Great. Okay, so the second area in our survival practices are around policy. So often, folks, most of you that are on the line, you don't build your policy, right? The policy comes to you. It comes to you in the form of a signed contract with guidelines and all of that stuff. So a lot of this messaging is directed at government. So governments, if you're on the line with us today, you set the stage for effective, purposeful practice. And what we know, and Angela and I have seen this, and we've operated this way ourselves, your program guidelines become the Bible of program behavior. In fact, I've worked, in various programs where as soon as the guidelines come out, I will go through it with a fine-tooth comb and I will separate the musts. So here are the musts, and I create checklists, right? So here are your musts. Here are the shoulds. I'll talk about shoulds in a second. But what we know is that when your funder puts out these guidelines, so government, if you tell me I must, I will. If you tell me I must not, then I won't. But if you leave it gray, I will look for clues to make best guesses on the choices that I think you most want me to make. And the reason I do this is because you hold the purse strings. And we talk a lot about that in the book, how just that very kind of threat and opportunity of funding and defunding, right? How much that influences behavior. So what we really need from a policy perspective is for governments to only roll out evidence-based employment programming. They've done done the research, they've paid for program evaluations, they have reviewed interjurisdictional research findings from other countries that are trying to solve these programs, solve these problems. And Angela and I have had many, many, many frustrating moments. Remember I said we were sharing our cranky. Here's our cranky, right? We have seen research from all over the globe, and we have seen government invest huge amounts of money into paying people to do meta-analysis across this research, and then they put out a program that has nothing to do with what the best practice says. It's the same old, right? So when we are designing policy, we talk about this quite a bit in the book as well, is absolutely they have to consult and consider the collective wisdom and the expertise of the local employment networks that deliver the programs on the ground every single day. They are the face of the program, and there is no one that is closer to the job seekers and the employers. No one. And we see this quite often, right? Where we'll go in and work with governments and work with, you know, the public servants that are in those roles that have never worked the field. We've been in meetings where we talk about job development and someone puts up their hand and says, "What's job development?" Right? And you're like, but you're designing the policy, right? So there has to be this consult on the ground. So under the policy section, there are 6 things that we look at. One, which we talk about a lot, figure out your purpose, because policy has to hinge on purpose, not the other way around, right? Figure out the purpose. 2, figure out who you serve. And in the book, we say, hint, your public servants. Figure out who you serve. 3, speak truth to power and pick your hard. So it's all hard. None of this is simple. We wouldn't have to invest billions of dollars into these programs if this was a simple thing, right? So we know that we have governments that, you know, or politicians that want to get elected, right? And so there's all of these public announceables, and we have to be able to demonstrate that we're really serious about employment and cracking down on poverty and homelessness and all of that stuff, all really important stuff. And what you're about to launch isn't going to work. We know that. So do I launch a program that doesn't work, or do I speak truth to power? Pick your hard. 4, only roll out evidence-based employment program. Pay attention to the research, right? We are seeing over and over again programs that are being launched that really are paying no attention to the research, or they're being launched and everything's a pilot. We're just going to figure this out, right? It almost felt like that. I think so about a decade ago, Nova Scotia rolled a bunch of stuff out, and it was like, we're just going to issue contracts and you guys figure it out, right? 5, BS, performance measurement and management frameworks, generate BS survival practices. So you create a crappy performance management framework that only measures the absence and presence of a job. And if you spent the money, then you are going to get bullshit survival practices. That's how this is going to go. So that's number 5. And 6, stop hog tying your service delivery network. This goes back to that concept about greater accountability can only come with greater flexibility. And what we're finding more and more and more is that the autonomy, the expertise, it's all being ignored, right? So we're creating you know, service needs inventories, or, you know, needs assessments where a computer system is going to do this for you, employment counselor. So don't even worry about thinking like, you know, that like 4 or 5, 6 year, 7-year degree you did, don't even worry about that, because we have this new system over here where you just put in a couple of variables, it's going to spit it all out for you, right? So Angela, what do you have to say on this policy piece?
So Sarah, could you just talk about accountabilism? I think maybe all of this wraps into that term that you love so much, accountabilism.
Accountabilism. So we talk about accountabilism in the book. It's David Weinberger wrote an article called Accountabilism for the Harvard Business Review. It's quite old now, but man, is it ever relevant, right? And the idea of accountabilism is that we can hold people to some really very exact outcomes, these targets, right? All we need to do is just change one more form, right? Just change one more policy. Like, we can hold people to this perfection. And if we don't, then we are going to eat our young. right? So accountabilism, and it talks about the article itself talks about how we get into that place. But the rules of modern accountability, and we talk about the banana bread recipe in the book, Angela, right?
Mhm.
So the example we use in the book of the banana bread recipe is so Angela has like a master's degree in baking. Right? She is like a super pastry chef, whatever else, right? Like she owns like 4 bakeries, and I'm going to hire her to make me a banana bread. Now, normally I would just say, Angela, I want you to make me banana breads, and we are going to measure satisfaction on a scale of 1 to 5, how much people like this banana bread. And if you don't have a score of 4 or 5 on that, you're going to lose your funding. And Angela's like, no problem. People love my banana bread. Oh, no, 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 wait. So Angela, this is the recipe that we want you to use. Okay, these are the exact bananas that you must use, the exact flour, the exact eggs. Everything must be at this temperature. This is the order in which you must put everything in the bowl. This is the type of bowl that you're going to use. You must get 3 quotes to get each one of these materials. So everything must be put in the bowl exactly this way. You're going to put it in at this temperature. You're going to use this pan, this liner, whatever else. So this is exactly how you are going to do it. Can I now hold Angela accountable for the quality and the how customers view my banana bread? So let's just see in the chat box. Can I hold Angela accountable for that? We just got a ha. Ha. No, 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 no. The answer is absolutely not. And it's such a ridiculous example, but it's real, right? That when they tell us that you must achieve these outcomes for these marginalized populations within this time frame, these are the kinds of results. Oh, and by the way, we are going to shackle you with this needs assessment inventory, and you must use this material, and you must, and this is the case management model, and anyone can do it. Absolutely. Right? We can hire anybody because anybody can be an employment counselor. Boy, could we start ranting about this one. In fact, it takes us to our next one. So let's move to that.
But Angela, I just want to say something, Sarah, that Nancy said. She said, yes, you can hold me accountable if I agreed to the terms from the get-go. And that's a really good point. And that again is about that leading up and persuading and influencing and talking about your performance story and what you know about your community and all of that you've just talked about.
And it's so tricky, right? Because they hold the purse string. So if I don't agree to the terms, am I laying off my 40 staff? Right?
Yes.
So what we do is we agree to the terms, and then we ask for forgiveness later. We didn't do it the way you wanted because the way you wanted was stupid. Right? Or we do, and we don't hit the target, so we have very demoralized staff. But there's, so again, and we're not pointing blame. What we're doing in the book is acknowledging how complicated this stuff is, right?
And difficult, and difficult and discouraging.
So,
imagine, and you have a job. Imagine if you don't, and you have all of these barriers that you're going into these services.
Absolutely. So the second webinar that we're launching, $25 webinar, is hitting the targets but missing the point. Is the sector measuring the right things? So it's a webinar that's going to talk about how do you develop a performance measurement framework, and it's also going to encourage you to think about what else you should be measuring, because part of the problem is we allow governments. The government is in the business of performance measurement, not us. So they hold the story, right? They collect the data, they hold the story, but are they measuring the right things, right? So this webinar will really look at what else could and should we be measuring? What does the research say we should be measuring? And what could we be considering as an organization? So the third section is practice, or a third revival practice. And it struck Angela and I that both of us are do yoga, and it struck us after years that the yogi at the front of the room often talks about our practice, setting intentions for our practice, right? That you're not, whatever, right? Talking about our yoga practice, investing in it, knowing what we want to get out of it. But in the decades that we've worked in the field, although it's changing ever so slightly, I'd like to think we have something to do with that, Angela, is that people don't talk about their practice. We never heard people in the decades talk about, the job developers, employment counselors talking about their practice. And we believe that needs to change. We have a practice, right? So there's a book that we reference called Peak, right? And there are 4 things that they talk about in purposeful practice. 1, if you don't have clear values or vision of expertise, then your practice is unlikely to be effective. What do you believe in? Ties you back into purpose. 2, practice should be hard. Your jobs feel hard? Good. They should be hard, because if it's not hard, we're not doing our jobs. We're not, because this is these are complex issues, and it's just hard by default. 3, you can't watch yourself swing. They talk about Tiger Woods having multiple swing coaches, right? And Tiger Woods says you can't watch yourself swing. So what do you have as far as feedback loops? Your funder gives you feedback loops in the form of data. What kind of feedback loops do you have internally? Do you do clinical supervision? Do you help each other do peer reviews of how you practice? What is the feedback loop so that you can become feedback informed practitioners? And 4, magic does not happen in your comfort zone. Angela, I know that, so Angela is the guru in job development, and a lot of the issue, I think I've heard you talk before, is about, the comfort zone of going to the chamber breakfast and, sitting at all of these tables, etc. But how many phone calls have you made this week?
Yeah, the comfort zone of getting in a job ad and sending resumes in an email.
Yeah.
Praying that the employer is going to respond.
Which is astounding, right? Because it's actually what we tell clients not to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we do it.
Don't get us started on job boards, Sarah. Don't get us started.
All right. So under the practice section, there are 5 broad categories that we talk about. Know what you signed up for is number 1, right? So employment counselors and job developers, right? And management, or anybody that's in this field, know what you signed up for. 2, commit to a culture of right action. Angela, I know you talk a lot about right action. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
It's doing the right thing, even if it costs you, because that's what professionals do. We lose. And we also are in really important work where we can't have job seekers lose. We're in the business of giving people chances. That's what we do, even if we lose.
There's lots of people giving kudos to Tara. Tara says, well, there's hard work, and then there's being tied up in administrative processes that have nothing to do with helping people connect to the jobs, especially in the latest transformation. Accountabilism. Right? Yes. It's and Tara, people are high-fiving you on that one.
And Sarah, that comes to when we talk about that fear-based culture, everyone's just trying to make it work, like that's where the accountabilism comes in. There's good intentions with
even from things, a policy perspective.
Even from a policy, but if going back to the feedback informed and reflective practice and all of that, we have to stop and say, I've been on the treadmill. Is it working? We've been doing this for 20 years. Is it working? And it isn't. And we're still on that same treadmill.
And what is it about this newest program design that is going to help influence, help change? Like, is that even purposeful from a continuous improvement perspective? Right? So the 5 areas, and under practice. Number 1, know what you signed up for. Number 2, commit to a culture of right action. Number 3, hire the right people and engage their hearts. Right? So if the thing is, and somebody already made that comment, and we talk about it in the book, right? Is like, anybody can be an employment counselor, right? Well, what's, how did you get this job? It's my neighbor, right? Or I was unemployed, right? No, we are dealing with human behavior, human motivation. Like, these are some of the most difficult things to change. What are you bringing to the table? Right? And how do we engage people's hearts? Number 4, define your operating model and your practice model. So we talk in the book about why it's so darn important that everybody in your organization knows what your operating model is. So Ange, can you talk a little bit about that? I'm aware of time now too, but operating model and practice model.
Yeah. So the thing is, organizations, and Sarah, we go into organizations where everybody has a different case management model. Everyone's doing what they're comfortable doing. We believe in having a framework a framework where people can be flexible within it. And as you said, Sarah, there's like hundreds of models of case management and counseling frameworks or whatever. But what is the language you speak in your organization? Like when I work with organizations on job development, it's like, what is your model? What is your job development model? For me, it's prospect, needs analysis, selling, follow-up. Simple. If you know what that is, if we all know the definition and what happens within that, we can have conversation, we can work on that continuous improvement. But if we're all using different definitions, if we're all, and job readiness is a really good example of that. There's not a common definition. So having those things in the organization where there's consistency, but still flexibility.
Fantastic. So the fifth one in this area is take employer engagement off the side of your desk. So 5 there, and I know I kind of jumbled them up. Know what you signed up for, commit to a culture of right action, hire the right people, engage their hearts, define your operating model and your practice model, and take employer engagement off the corner of your desk. So the webinar in this section is chasing employment outcomes, understanding what influences success. So these are called the common factors. And the common factors is a meta-analysis that was done looking at over 50 years of research, looking at over 400 different therapeutic approaches. So when you think about how you practice, so I was trained in motivation, solution-focused brief therapy, also in cognitive behavioral approaches, motivational interviewing approaches. What have you been trained in? What do you come to the table with, right? Those are all just samples of models, but research tells us there isn't one that's better than another. In fact, cutting across all of those models, what influences outcomes are these 4 factors. So the first one, client factors, also called extra therapeutic factors, what the client brings into the office with them, is weighted at 40%. Do you know how to work with that? Relationship weighted at 30%. How do you build that alliance, that therapeutic alliance? Hope and expectancy. When someone comes to your organization, do they believe that they've come to the right place, that something is going to change, and do you believe in your client? And 15 is technique, right? 15% is technique. So, when I operate from a solution-focused brief therapeutic approach, there are techniques that I use there, right? So all of this stuff, we typically engineer, right? Everything from our marketing to our intake, to our needs assessment, to our interventions, to our job development, to everything that we do, we influence these 4 factors. So this webinar will focus specifically on understanding the 4 common factors and how can you pull them into your work.
And Sarah, I would say that this is also applicable to working with employers.
100%.
You're seeing the same thing, the importance of relationship, their hope and expectancy. So we'll be touching on that as well.
Fantastic. So we have, boy, Angela, I cannot tell you, I've been so darn happy with all these comments that we have in the
lots
in the
of
chat
exclamation
box.
marks here.
Lots of exclamation
from
marks.
Angela. Yeah.
Okay. We've had a couple of requests for talking about specific models, and we're steering away from it because, again, this is global. What we are talking about today is global. When we did this presentation in Connexus, we had people from all over the world, right? That said, yeah, us too, right?
Yeah.
Parking, creaming, gaming, right? And so much of it falls into the kind of the same broad areas that we've talked about. So, we end with a inspiration, right? This is hard work, and we will experience failure, but we can't give up and never will give up. And we end with, let's begin, shall we? So I don't know, Ange, if you've got something to say on this one.
Yeah, we know, I mean, there's smart people. All of you are smart people. And everybody has ideas and experience to share, to bring to the table. And we are hoping, we want the book to inspire debate. We want to have these conversations. We want to bring it out from behind the curtain and say, this is what's happening. What are we going to do about it? Because it is a problem worth solving. It's a problem worth fixing. And as you see with your employers right now, the star and your service numbers, the stars and suns, they're not coming into your service. they're going out and they're getting no problem in COVID. It's the moons and the clouds that you have to have a different model for. And hopefully this book will help you see how, what that might look like.
Wonderful. All right. So I jumped up from the socials page, right? So please do join us, right? Join us on Facebook and on LinkedIn. We're just getting started on this, but we certainly will, be actively engaging in the conversation around this and putting out webinars that will be very kind of laser focused at the survival practices, and this is where you're going to learn all about them. So the book is still not out. It's still not out, but we were told
Sarah,
spring.
COVID.
Well, it's true. And somebody asked that about the employment sector, pre-COVID, post-COVID, etc. Absolutely. All that stuff is relevant, but it doesn't change the core issues, right? The stuff
I mean,
we're
around
talking
our
about.
publication,
I know
Sarah.
you are, but I tied it into something that that folks here have put. So how do you get the book? So you can pre-order online, but at this stage, we're so close to launch that we don't encourage that now. It'll be just another couple of weeks, maybe, Ange, 3-4 weeks, and it will be available wherever you buy books.
Yeah, wherever you buy books, Indigo, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever. It will be available in ebook and hardcover and soft cover. And it is something that Sarah and I, like we keep saying, COVID, because we're just chomping at the bit as others are, I'm sure, to get the book in hand, and we will be announcing when we've got it for sure.
There's a question around audiobook. I think at some point there will be, but it's not in the works right away.
Maybe eventually, yeah. But we do want to leave you not feeling, we want you to be inspired. We do have optimism and hope, especially when people like you are interested in engaging in this conversation all over the world. So
yeah.
thank you. Yeah.
And I think, Sarah, Angela, that when we have a framework for having the conversation, right? Like it's not about pointing fingers, because the truth is and we say it in the book, we're all complicit.
Yeah.
Angela and I are complicit. We're all complicit, right? So how do we move forward even just a little bit? All right, Angela, we are pushing the end of the webinar. I don't know if there was any kind of real specific questions that we could address.
There's one. Joanna had said, how come the funders of all these support employment programs, agencies don't audit properly, no accountability, no compliance? I guess it depends on what the program is, isn't it? Doesn't it, Sarah? It's too much or too little and everywhere in between.
Yes, and of course they have absolutely rigorous frameworks around audit. Right. And the challenge is too, though, is that sometimes, there are I've seen some beautiful audit frameworks, right? Risk-based audit frameworks. But then there's auditing within the organization that kind of falls outside of the purview of the government, but it's what's happening actually in-house, right? So you get closer and closer to what we can influence and control. The other thing, when you talk about audit and evaluation, and we've seen this over and over again, and we talk about it a bit in the book, is the auditor general comes in, right? And they just slam the program, slam the program, and then we throw out the baby with the bathwater, and we start it all over again, and it's a bit maddening at times.
And same old program design. Start over again with that job readiness model, and let's get one more job board.
Yes, right? yes. Yeah. All right, folks. Thank you. We can't thank you enough, and thank you for being excited with us as well. It's we're so very thrilled about all of this. You good, Ange?
I'm great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And like Sarah said, please follow us on social, check out the website, and we'll keep you posted on when the book will be released. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Bye-bye.